Dan Levy, if you ever want to hit my line to just like have dinner sometime so I could talk to you and pick your brain, I would love that. But, you know, I know you're a very busy man, so I won't take it personally if you don't call. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the first episode of Contemplate. I got the idea for this series kind of a while back when I went to look at my notes that I did the first time I went to go film this. I actually had wanted to talk about season 1 of Running Point, and we're going to talk about season 2 of that show today. So it's been a minute since I came up with this idea, but now here we are. We're actually acting on concepts. So that's exciting. The idea behind Contemplate is basically just me being able to chit chat with you about everything I'm consuming in pop culture currently, whether it's TV shows, movies, music, podcasts I'm enjoying, conversations I heard, what I'm looking forward to in the next few weeks, different things like that, and just kind of a place for me to talk about all the things that I'm loving in terms of pop culture and media, I guess. Everything that's on my content plate. I just love talking about all the cool art and media that I see, and I love a reason to do it, and I love a reason to use my handy dandy little microphone. I'm trying to get my sister to restart our podcast, but in the meantime, we're going to use this for content plate. So the basic food groups on my content plate pretty much week to week will be what I'm watching, what I'm reading, what I'm listening to, and what's on the menu for next week. There also will be sprinkled in some pop culture news, fun things like that if there's things that I find interesting enough to talk about. I think this will probably be every 2 weeks. I would say weekly, but I can't promise there's enough for me to talk about every week. But if there is, I'll film it every week. We'll just have to wait and see, but let's get into it. It's time to eat, okay? First up, what I'm watching. Quickly gonna touch on The Pit, even though it's been a minute since the season finale, but I just love that show so much. I needed a chance to talk about it. The end of season 2 aired, I think it'll be 2 weeks ago now when this video's up. And it was just as good, if not better, than the first season. I just love the concept behind this show. It's like 24 meets Grey's Anatomy. And as everybody always talks about, it's so realistic. And it really puts you in the throes of the emergency room and what it's like to be a doctor. Dr. Robbie has my whole heart. Okay. I never watched. I think he was on ER. Is that correct? You know, I know he was on like an early 2000s medical soap, which I never watched, but I'm pretty sure this is just like a newer modern version of that character. And he just plays it so well. Like I understand why he was cast in 2 versions of essentially the same show, because he does really well as an ER doctor under a lot of pressure. So I'm obsessed, except I saw somewhere that the writers, I think it was, or someone that works on the show said that next season, season 3, because they're already renewed for season 3, they said next season was going to be Robbie's rock bottom. And to that I say, what do you mean? Because how was this not his rock bottom? My friend posted that and was like, is Dr. Robbie ever going to have a good day? And like, that's literally the question. Is Dr. Robbie ever going to have a good day? I really don't know. I hope so. If he's worse off next season than he is this season, like, is he going to be okay? Like, I just want him to be okay. But I think they did a really good job. My cousin said this too, who is a doctor. She's in her residency at Johns Hopkins. Shout out Maya. But she was saying how they did a really good job this season and in general at showing how hard it can be to balance like work and real life when you're a doctor, and balancing trying to have a family and like a real life and children and marriage and all the things that people kind of need to sustain a happy life. Maybe not need, but most people want, and be a successful doctor, especially in the emergency department. So I think it's just really interesting to not only see all these like really cool medical cases, which feel very realistic and not super dramatic the way that Grey's is, but also have a realistic portrayal of what it's like to be a doctor in that situation. And I think this season they did a lot better of a job, and I don't think they did a poor job at this last season. I don't think it made the show any less valuable, but I think they did a really good job at starting to let us into the lives of the characters, which I really enjoy. I know that was kind of a lot of people's critiques that didn't love the show as much, was that like there's no drama, there's no outside drama, there's nothing going on in the characters' lives or between each character, which to me wasn't much of a flaw. I felt like I was satiated enough by just like their relationship with their job and with being an emergency doctor and in being in such like a high pressure situation. That emergency department is literally like a pressure cooker, just waiting to burst. And I thought that that was interesting enough to sustain a whole TV show personally, but I know some people did not feel the same. And they were going in thinking more of like a Grey's Anatomy vibe and were disappointed not to get that. I think this season they started to sprinkle in more of the personal lives of the doctors while being able to keep the integrity of it not being like a soapy drama doctor show, if that makes sense. And I really enjoyed that. Like you had a little bit of a sprinkle of the one doctor who was having this kind of strange relationship with a former patient. He looks like Phineas from Phineas and Ferb, and I'm not seeing enough people talk about that, but I just had to put that out there because you can't tell me that that's not the human version of Phineas. So now that you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. But you got a little sprinkle of that. You got a sprinkle of him and the other doctor kind of living together for a little bit. I don't know why I'm blanking on literally everybody's names right now. Santos is the doctor he lived with. What was his name? I really can't remember. But you just got like a nice little sprinkle of everybody's kind of personal lives. We met Dr. Alashimi this season, and by the end, we started to understand a little bit more about her mental state. And I don't know, I really enjoyed the level at which they were able to start bringing in more personal information about each of these doctors while still keeping the integrity of it being like a very serious, realistic, and entertaining show. And then the last thing I noted about this season finale and just the show in general is like, obviously so much happens in this show, and especially in this season. This season takes place on the 4th of July. So it's just like a really crazy day, and they have all of these crazy mishaps happen. If you haven't watched season 2 of The Pitt, finish this and then go watch it because it's just so good. And I can't even really handle like gory stuff. I end up like this half the episodes, but I still think it's worth it. Even if you don't want to like watch them cut people open, just cover your eyes because the rest of the show is so good. But they just cram so much into one season, and it's a lot, but it doesn't ever feel like too much personally to me, to where it feels like super unrealistic. And one thing I loved that they did during the last episode of this season was they had all of the residents and doctors vocally recording notes from each patient because they had to get them into the system because of the fact that they like went analog for a couple of hours and they were doing everything by paper. So then they had to log everything back into the system once it came back up. And they did that with like voice notes, and they were doing like audio recordings of their notes to be transcribed. And I thought this was a really smart, I feel like it had to have been intentional. I don't know if it was, but it was a really great way to kind of remind the viewer how many things happened in this season and how many like insane things happened in each episode, because as you're watching something go down, you're hearing like one of the residents talk about a patient that they saw maybe in episode 2 or 3. And you're like, oh my gosh, that was this season. Like that was the shift. This show's so crazy. I thought it was really smart. And I feel like it was probably very reminiscent of what it's like to be an ER doctor and like looking back at the end of your shift and being like, holy shit, I can't believe that was like 8 hours ago. Feels like weeks ago, which is what it was for us. But in theory, I don't know. I think the show is really, really smart. I think it's really well done. I think it'll be interesting. I know that there's like a lot of upset because a couple doctors won't be in it next season and a couple new doctors will be in it. But and a lot of people are like not happy about that, but also it kind of is like the way it has to go because these are residents. They're going to be moving in and out of the hospital. Maybe some will stay, but a lot of them will eventually leave, which is just like the way the industry works. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how the dynamics of this hospital change under Dr. Robbie. Hopefully he comes back. I know he will because like he's the whole show. But you know, they leave you on that cliffhanger this season. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how the dynamics of the ER change as different doctors come in and out, hopefully for many seasons to come. So huge fan of The Pitt over here. I know it's been off for 2 weeks, but I just had to talk about it. The next thing that I've been watching and I finished is Paradise. Season 2, I believe came out a few weeks ago, but it's like bingeable. It's on Hulu, so it all, I think, came out all at once, if I'm not mistaken. I listened to Sterling K. Brown, who I love, on a podcast talking about it, and my sister had watched it. A few people had watched it and been talking about it, so I finally bit the bullet and watched Paradise, and I was not disappointed. It was really good. There were a few things that I was like, about. But overall, it was a really good show. I did go in kind of knowing a little bit more context than probably the average viewer, because I had listened to them talk on a podcast about like season 1 and things that happened in season 2, what was going on. So I knew a few things going into it that might have been like a little bit of a spoiler. Overall, I thought it was a really good show. They basically live in an underground bunker because the world has ended. All of these things start to go down after the president dies underground, which is like the first murder of this new world that they've created after the apocalypse, essentially. And then season 2, spoiler alert, they go outside the bunker. And Shailene Woodley is in season 2. And like, all I have to say without spoiling anything is justice for Shailene Woodley. She was so good in that show. Justice for her character, truly. The only real criticism I had of the show was that for me personally, it was kind of difficult in season 1 more so than season 2 to tell when they were going back and forth and jumping between timelines. Things felt a little bit too similar. I feel like typically there's pretty clear physical cues of like, okay, now we're back like before the world ended. Now we're back to when the world was over. I think the biggest physical cue or like sign that you were in a flashback was that the president was alive, because he was obviously dead in present day, which happens like 5 minutes into the first episode, so that's not a spoiler. That was like a pretty obvious cue, but sometimes it was still a little bit hard to understand when we were in a flashback and when we weren't. That was my only kind of critique. It got a little bit confusing at certain times, but not like too crazy. I was just writing things down as I watched, I think. One, so many people die in this show. People just drop left and right, like kind of like Grey's Anatomy vibes. Like people are just gone, which is crazy. The fact that season 2 takes place on Graceland is like so random, and my grandpa just passed away right before I started watching this show, and he like really loved Elvis, like that was his man. And the fact that this show just all took place on Graceland was like kind of funny to just, I don't know, like a very random thing about the show. And I guess it makes sense geographically with like the plot and the way things play out, but it felt like a little bit of a God wink. The last point I wanted to make about this show is Jane. The character Jane, the actress, her name is Nicole Bryden Bloom. She is phenomenal. Like, give this girl an Emmy, give this girl awards. I don't know if she's already won something, but she should. She is so good. Sterling K. Brown is obviously phenomenal. Honestly, all the actors in the show are really good, but Jane's character has to code switch so many times, and she is so good at playing both really sweet and really fucking crazy. Like, there's a scene, I think I wrote down, it was season 2, episode 6, when she's looking in the mirror and she like code switches into pretending to be this other character in the show. And like, it sent chills down my spine. She is so good. One of the best actresses in this show. And I think her character is very like nuanced, kind of annoying. You kind of hate her by the end of season 2. Big time. But like, wow, huge plot twist with her character. Again, sorry if you haven't watched, but like, that show is really good. Also, the part when they finally find out like what happened the day the world ended, and it's basically just a big flashback episode of like what went down. Spooky. I didn't like that episode. It felt a little bit too realistic. It was hitting a little bit too close to home. I don't know. That shit felt way too real. Too close for comfort, but like really well done, but really fucking scary. The last thing I wrote down was that I don't know if any of y'all got Hulu with ads like I do, but there's a New York Quits commercial to get people to quit smoking that comes on every godforsaken ad break on Hulu. And it's disgusting. And I get like it's doing its job. I'm not going to smoke a cigarette, I promise. But my God, I'm eating dinner, watching TV. I don't need to see a man coughing up blood, okay? I don't smoke. Somebody take me off of like the targeted demographic for this ad. I don't want it. Big mistakes. Let's talk about big mistakes with Dan Levy. My king. If he was straight, I'd marry him. Like, I love that man with my whole heart. I think he is so smart, so talented, so funny, and so incredibly charming in all the press that I've watched of this man. I love him so much. Obviously, Schitt's Creek is like a masterpiece, okay? If Dan Levy has no fans, I am 6 feet under, I swear. And Big Mistakes was no exception. It was so good. He was on Jake Shane's podcast, and Jake Shane explained Big Mistakes as The Sopranos for gay people. And like, it really is like a modern day millennial Gen Z Sopranos. Like, it's so good. It's so funny. These two siblings, one is a pastor who's gay and the other is his sister that like, I believe, was living in New York or Hollywood and had come home because she failed to pursue her dreams, and they fall into an organized crime scandal, and they kind of become part of this big organized crime ring. And it is so funny. It's so good. I'll talk about this in the listening segment of this show, but Dan Levy was on Conan O'Brien, and Conan mentioned to him, like, you play stressed and like freaking out really, really well. Like, and it's so true, especially in the show. Like, Dan Levy is at his funniest when his character is going through it and when he's freaking out. It is so good. And it reminds me of the episode of Schitt's Creek when he, like, I think it's the beginning of a certain season when he goes to the Amish farm. One of the very viral moments of that show when Dan Levy's like sitting with the Amish woman on the Amish farm in that crazy black hoodie. It reminds me of that when like he is just at his wit's end. He's done. He's over it. He's tweaking and he is at his funniest, like genuinely. And Big Mistakes was literally like 8 episodes of that. They're 30 minutes long. They're super fast. They're so good. The actress that plays the sister, her name is Taylor Ortega. I think she's been in other stuff. I didn't really know who she was from other things. She was phenomenal too. The only thing I will say is that Dan Levy created this show with Rachel Sennett. He came up with the idea. And I can't remember if he said that they had worked together in the past or if like he just loved I Love LA. I don't remember what the connection was, but he reached out to her and asked if she wanted to make the show with him. And she did. And they made this together. And I do kind of wish Rachel Sennett played the sister. I think she would have been so great for that part. I do think Taylor Ortega was probably the right choice, but I just think Rachel Sennett is so funny. And I would have loved to see her in this show in some fashion. But you can definitely feel like her writer's presence through each episode because it's so funny and so good. Oh, and Jack Innanen is in this show, who I didn't know Jack Innanen or like who he was. And then we did a video with him at work that I worked on. And he's so handsome and charming. And everybody was like obsessed with him there, obviously. And then I watched Big Mistakes. I was like, oh my God, that's him. And he was great on that show. His character was so annoying, but he played it really well. I really enjoyed him in that. And I'm curious and excited to see what else he does. I know he's like kind of new on the scene, but also kind of not. I forget what else he's been in, but I enjoyed him. I think he's got a nice career ahead of him. But I loved Big Mistakes. Highly recommend it. It's on Netflix if you haven't watched it. It is the easiest show to binge. I literally started it on like a Thursday night and finished it by Friday afternoon. Highly, highly recommend. Last thing I've been watching is Running Point. I love this show so much. It is based on the family that owns the Los Angeles Lakers. And it is loosely based on the story of Jeannie Buss, who's the president of the Lakers, and how she inherited that title from her father when he passed away, and just kind of everything she went through as a woman being president of one of the like biggest organizations in the NBA. She's one of like 4 children and the rest are boys. So everyone was kind of like, why her? And she went through a lot of trials and tribulations. And from my understanding, she was a part of the show from like step 1, which that always makes me respect a project a lot more that's like based on a person, is when that person was heavily involved, because it just makes me trust that like the story is being told the correct way. Even though it's loosely based on her, it's not all factual. The general vibe and like what this character is going through, to me, I believe is being portrayed correctly because she was so involved, versus like something like Love Story about JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. I honestly didn't finish it, but it was really good. And obviously it was like everywhere. It was super successful and popular. But as you know, there was a lot of drama with JFK's, I think, grandson. I forget his name, but that like the Kennedys were not involved in the making of the show at all. It was Ryan Murphy, who's like a little bit of a sleazeball. And it just taints it slightly. Like, it's still a really good show. And you know that some of these things are factually true because they happen in history, but also like they're not portraying people the way that they should be portrayed or the way that things happened. And I don't know. It just puts like a little bit of a murky color on the show versus something like this, which is so fun, so witty, so well done. And then you also know that the person and the family it's based off of have given them their blessing and that they're being accurately portrayed, at least to the level of which it's supposed to be true. if that makes sense. So I really like that. I very much respect that. And Kate Hudson plays the character based off of Jeannie Buss, and she does a phenomenal job. I honestly forget sometimes that Kate Hudson is an actress. I just think of her as a supermodel. I kind of sleep on Kate Hudson as an actress. So seeing her in this, I get really excited about it because she's so talented. She's so funny, and she plays this woman so well. And I think her character is very interesting because she presents as this very confident, badass woman who has to run this really famous NBA team. But behind it all of the shit she gets does really affect her. She just doesn't let anybody see it. And I think it's a really cool peek behind the curtain of what that was probably like for Jeannie Buss. And again, I think they portray it very well. I think I'm only 5 episodes into season 2. I had to cut myself off the other night, and I believe I was about to start season 6 when I forced myself to turn the TV off and go to bed. So I have not finished, but one thing I did note, which I love, is that I feel like season 1 was a really interesting kind of look into what this woman's life was like and setting up her story really well. And then I feel like season 2, they were able to get a little bit more playful with the plot. And I don't know, again, how accurate all of these things are and how many of these things are based on what really happened in this woman's life. I feel like for season 2, they have room to be a little bit more creative and playful, and I feel like it's showing. There's just a lot more. But the show is really fun. It's really funny. I find myself literally laughing out loud several times, which is always a good sign, but also doesn't take much because my laugh is loud regardless. But yeah, I do really enjoy the show, and I highly recommend it. And Brenda Song is in the show as well. She's in season 1 and 2. And it's fun because I know that she's a huge basketball fan. London Tipton makes a great chief of staff. London Tipton makes a great chief of staff for the LA Waves. I'll tell you that much. Okay, moving on to our second food group, what I'm listening to. This is going to be a mix of music and podcasts. Honestly, music over the last 6 months has just not been hitting for me until this week. I actually wrote down 2 albums that I've been listening to, but I have been a huge podcast girly. I have my slew of podcasts, my schedule for the week, and every day I know exactly what one I'm listening to, what one I'm excited and looking forward to, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday rolls around, and anytime I need something to put on, I get really sad because all my shows are over and I've already listened to everything on my list. So if more podcasts could start releasing things on Saturdays and Sundays, that would also be lovely. That being said, this is going to be everything that I'm listening to lately, and we're starting with the new Noah Kahan album because it's so good. The album is called The Great Divide. So far, I've only saved 1 song. My kind of routine when a new album comes out is to listen to it front to back, so long as it's somebody I'm a fan of and I know I'm going to like all the music, which Noah Kahan is one of those people. I usually listen to the full thing front to back in order, the way the artist intended. And then if a song sticks out to me, I'll just go add it to my liked songs and kind of go back to it. Then I'll just listen to the ones I saved. And on occasion, I'll go back to a full album if I hear another song on the radio or whatever it is. But that's pretty much how I go about listening to a new album. And so far, the only song I saved is 23. That was the only song that took me out of where I was and was ooh, what is this one? I really like it. Phenomenal song. And I think the reason that only one of them did that is because Noah Kahan's songs do all kind of sound similar, a little bit the same, if you ask me personally. So it takes me a few listens to the album in full to find the ones that really stand out. But upon first real listen, 23 is my favorite song on the album. Again, I haven't really fully listened to lyrics. I haven't read into what some of these songs mean, which is one of my favorite things to do and always makes me either like something more or less when I do a little bit more research or watch a little bit more press. But so far, I'm a fan. And I'm a fan of Noah Kahan anyway. He's just good. We were missing that tone and that sound, and he brought it right back to us. The next thing I've been listening to is the new Luke Combs album, My Honey, My Teddy Bear Man, my favorite country boy, Luke Combs. This album came out a month ago, and it's still on repeat. It's the first 5 or 6 liked songs on my liked playlist on Spotify, and I listen to it nonstop. Luke Combs pretty much exclusively puts out no skips albums, in my opinion. There's maximum 1 to 2 per project, if any. And this is not an exception. I love every single song on this album. I love pretty much everything Luke Combs does. So this might be a little bit of a biased review, but This album is called The Way I Am. It came out on March 20th, so it's been out for a little bit. But I have a slew of favorites, and I'm going to read them off to you. Wish Upon a Whiskey. These are in order of the album. Wish Upon a Whiskey, phenomenal song. Gets stuck in my head all the time. As Soon as I Get Home, I'm pretty sure this is like a fan favorite. Rethink Some Things, amazing. Giving Her Away, beautiful song. I'm not anywhere near getting married, but that song like brings a tear to my eye. It's so cute. Alcohol of Fame, phenomenal. Tell Them About Tonight is interesting. So I follow someone who had like an advanced listen to the album because she did like some press with Luke Combs' team. And she was saying that like Tell Them About Tonight felt like a version of Long Live by Taylor Swift, and that it was by like hands down her favorite song. That's her favorite Taylor Swift song. I'm not a Swiftie, famously, but I do love the song Long Live. Like that shit slaps, and that song will always hit different. That's on my all-timers playlist, okay? And I'm pretty sure he sampled it. Like I would put money on the fact that Luke Combs probably sampled Long Live for the song because it sounds just like it, and it really does have the same vibes, the same energy of like this is just like the prime of my life and when I look back. And lastly, Rich Man, which I love. It reminds me of my grandpa. This song just reminds me of him, and it gives me goosebumps. Like it's such a beautiful song, and I love it so much. So those are my favorites off of the Luke Combs album. Hopefully I will be able to see him when he goes on tour. He's one of my favorite people to see in concert. He is a phenomenal performer, and Luke Combs in my book can just do no wrong. So shout out him. The last two things on my what I'm listening to lately are podcasts. I pretty much always am listening to Armchair Expert. Okay, Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard. If Dak Shepard has no fans, I'm dead. That being said, I don't have any episodes of Armchair written down today. I haven't had any recently that like really stuck with me the way some of his podcast episodes really do. But he's one where like I pretty much will listen no matter who is on, even if I don't know the person, because 90% of the time it's a really good episode, even if I don't know who the person is and I become a fan. I always listen to the Friday episodes because those are fun. Those are like the episodes where listeners call in and tell a story based on like the topic that they put out. So those are always really fun. But in terms of like an interview, I haven't heard anything that really stuck with me lately. But the two that I did write down are Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend with Dan Levy, which I watched after finishing Big Mistakes. I was watching all of Dan Levy's press because that is what I do. I finish a show, I get really sad, and I consume pretty much any and all content that I can find based around that show. So I went on a kick of Dan Levy's press tour, and he went on Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, which differently from Armchair Expert, I really only listen to Conan O'Brien's podcast when someone I know is on it. But then every time I listen, I'm like, I need to listen to this more often because he is really funny. Like Conan is a great interviewer and he's very funny, which makes sense because he was on late night. So Conan's good at his job, but I don't listen to this one regularly, but I thought this episode was really good. I also listened to Dan Levy on Jake Shane's podcast, which I absolutely loved. Like if you're looking for a good episode of a podcast to listen to, I think that one's really fun. Jake Shane, I really like his podcast because he's like technically interviewing celebrities and people, but he's not an interviewer, and I think he would own that. He does a good job. He asks interesting questions, but also it's a much more relaxed kind of like, it feels like they're just hanging out rather than like a formal sit down interview, which I think is the point. Like I don't think there would be offense taken to that statement. I mean it as a compliment. And the Dan Levy episode of Therapist specifically, I enjoyed so much because I felt like I was watching Dan Levy talk to a younger version of himself. And like, I just feel like Jake Shane is on a similar trajectory. And they started to talk about the show Jake Shane's creating that's based on his own life around a character based on himself. And at the end, like Dan Levy offered to like keep in touch and help him and mentor him. And I just feel like that is a really beautiful working relationship that is going to come from that interaction. And I loved watching that. Versus the Conan O'Brien interview was more just like fun. I don't know. It was like a fun traditional interview. They were really funny. He talks in both interviews about how Schitt's Creek like wasn't super successful until it was nearly over, which I think is really interesting. Because it came out on traditional cable. And he just says in both interviews, like he got really lucky because it wasn't like a crazy smash hit, but they just continued to let him make it and continued renewing the show. And it didn't really take off until it hit Netflix, which I think he said happened as he was developing the final season. So he kind of just was making what he wanted to make, and he was kind of not really like beholden to all of this crazy press and success that probably would have put more pressure on him had he had it during the first like 5 seasons of the show. And I think it really shows. And I think from that he learned, and he says this, and you can kind of tell in all of these interviews that he truly lives this way. I think that allowed him to make something for himself, and because he wanted to make it. And I think it helped him in the rest of his endeavors know that like you have to do things for you and because you love them, and that because you'll be proud of them before you're doing them because of what other people will think. And I think that's part of why I was really excited about what I assume is going to be a great working relationship with Jake Shane, because I think he'll help Jake Shane a lot through his anxieties and like his fear of what other people think about his show while making it. And I think that really comes through in Schitt's Creek. And I think it's the reason for a lot of Schitt's Creek's success is that like, this is a show Dan Levy felt like he needed to make, and he made it without any hesitancy based on what other people think. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, and I think it showed really well. And he said in the Conan O'Brien interview, he said, I actually feel kind of lucky that people didn't like Schitt's Creek until it was over. And it just like he had to work a lot harder. He had to push himself a lot more, but he also had to trust in what he was making because it wasn't like a smash hit right away. The other quote I wrote down is, I would rather take the time and sacrifice momentum than take every opportunity and not be the right person for them, which I think was really interesting. He was kind of talking about picking and choosing things that are right for him. And he has a really good outlook on like rejection and being able to see something that didn't work out for what it was, which was just that it wasn't the right fit. It wasn't going to work. And it was probably a blessing in disguise. And I wrote down, he has such a great outlook on failure and criticism. And as long as you're confident in what you're doing and making and not just doing it to impress other people, you should be proud of it. But I do forget that he's like in his 40s. So he's learned a lot of that with time and through a long career. He just like looks so good that I think he's like 29. You know, I think we're the same age, but it's fine. Conan points out in the podcast that the very first frame of Big Mistakes is Dan Levy like standing at the front of a church as a gay pastor. And Conan makes the point that like from the jump, right out the gate, Dan Levy differentiates his character in Big Mistakes from his character in Schitt's Creek. And I think that is genius and so important. And I didn't think of it as being intentional, but I believe it was. And Conan noticed it like right away. And I think it's so smart and like such a nuanced little thing, but I think it's really easy for people to obviously put someone in a box. We see it all the time with different like famous sitcoms and shows, and people kind of just get stuck as their first big break character. But I think Dan Levy did a really good job at being like, this character has some similarities, but he's very different from David Rose, and we're going to make sure you see him that way. And I didn't think of that move as an intentional move, but as they talked about it on the Conan podcast, it seems like it was, of like, from the jump, this is not David Rose. This is a gay pastor who does not live proudly in his sexuality and has a lot more to worry about. But then at the root of it, they do kind of have that. They're a little bit insecure and they care a lot what other people think and about the way they live their life. And I don't know. It just has they all have the same Dan Levy charm. And I think he just has that charm running through his veins. And I really want him on Good Hang. I really would love to see him in conversation with Amy Poehler, because I think she is such a fun conversationalist, and it shows in her podcast, and hers is the next one I'm going to talk about. So I would love to see him on that show. I would also love to hang out with him and have a meal. So Dan Levy, if you ever want to hit my line to just like have dinner sometime so I could talk to you and pick your brain, I would love that. But, you know, I know you're a very busy man, so I won't take it personally if you don't call. The last thing on what I'm listening to is Good Hang with Amy Poehler. Another show that I listen to pretty much no matter who is on, unless it's someone that like I really don't know or really don't care about, for lack of a better word, I'm like not a big fan of, then I won't listen. But for the most part, I will watch this podcast or listen to this podcast because Amy Poehler is such a large figure in the industry that she has pretty decent friendships, it seems, with most of the people that she brings on her show. And I don't think that's like a nepotism kind of thing. I don't think she's just bringing on people that she has access to. I think she genuinely is just like a good person and has friendships with so many people in the industry because she's funny, talented, friendly, it seems, and has been around for so long that I think she's just naturally attracted so many of these people into her circle. So for the most part, like, there's typically really interesting stories coming out of her episodes, and I enjoy them no matter who's on. The one thing I did write down, one bone I have to pick with Good Hang and her whole production team, and this is probably because I work in podcasts and I edit them, so I pay attention to continuity. But when she opens her show, she talks about who's coming on. She talks about what they're going to talk about, and it's always very specific to what they talked about in the episode. And they do a thing before, which I think really differentiates her show, and I really like it, where they talk to somebody that knows their guest, ask them for a question, and then has the interview. This is like so stupid and niche, and like I don't think anyone really notices this but me. When she's doing her intro, she's so clearly filming it after the episode's filmed because she talks about what they talked about. But then she introduces the person they're about to Zoom with to talk nicely behind the guest's back, which is what she says. And then she says, so we're going to talk to so-and-so. And then she puts on her headphones and she says, hey, and acts like she's hopping on the Zoom with them. And then the episode starts. And it's a pet peeve of mine because she can't have known what they talked about if she was just now hopping on Zoom and recording this intro beforehand. So there's a continuity issue there. Not sure if anyone flagged that in production, but I always notice it at the beginning of every episode. So. But I love this podcast, point blank, period. Like, I think Amy has found a really great lane for herself. I think, like, of course, everybody has a podcast. Of course, every comedian has a podcast. She waited quite a while to do it. It's fairly new. It won the Golden Globe. That was also a very new award this year, kind of controversial. And it beat out her ex-husband's podcast, which is kind of a slay. Smartless. If you didn't know, she was married to... Which of the Smartless guys was she married to? She was married to Will Arnett up until, what year? 2016. And then just a year into her podcast, she beat him in the Golden Globes. And Smartless is like one of the biggest shows on the internet. So go off, queen. She's recently had on Kerry Washington, who I love. Kerry Washington was also on Jake Shane's podcast. And I loved that interview as well because Jake Shane was just like so open about how obsessed he is with Scandal. And it's all they talked about. So that's also a recommendation I would make is Kerry Washington on Therapist. She was on Amy Poehler's podcast recently. And I think she just was so good. I love that she really embraces Scandal as like the thing that put her on the map. And I hate when people don't do that. I hate when people kind of veer away from the thing that made them famous. I think she's someone also that could be like put in the Olivia Pope box, but I think she appreciates that. She talks on Amy Poehler's podcast about like what she learned from being Olivia Pope and how Olivia Pope changed her life. And I think she looks back on that, or I know she looks back on that very fondly. So I really appreciate the way she talks about it. It was just a really good episode. And then last week she had Nick Offerman on, who was obviously from Parks and Rec with her and plays Ron Swanson, who is a hysterical character. And it's really, really funny because I feel like after Parks and Rec, he kind of got cast into the same kind of roles. Like he gets typecasted a bit into that like big lumberjack, closed off, dry, funny character. And it's funny to see him out of that context in just like a normal conversation as himself and realize like he's a bit of just like a nerd. Like he was a theater kid. He was kind of just like a strange guy. And I feel like that's why I really love podcasts with celebrity interviews that are good interviewers, because you kind of learn that these actors and like artists are just like weirdos, and it's kind of fun. Like I feel like everyone on Armchair always sounds really smart and like introspective and well spoken, and I just feel like it's fun to see this side of a lot of celebrities that is just so comfortable because the co-host is a peer or the host is a peer of theirs. I feel like that's what Amy Poehler does really well, is make everybody feel really comfortable. And with Nick Offerman, like it was just really fun, like to hear him talk about his life, to see him in this context and not as Ron Swanson or someone similar. They talk a lot about the audition process for acting and how like he almost wasn't cast for Parks and Rec as Ron Swanson. And I I wrote this down because I thought it was so crazy. Like, it's a really crazy concept to think about, like, how different a hit show like Parks and Rec, like The Office, like a handful of any other show, Schitt's Creek, for example, how different those shows could have been had they not been cast the way they were. Like, if Ron Swanson was anyone else, that show might not have been what it is. And it's very interesting because a lot of the times, like, these people kind of fall into these roles, and how many things had to kind of align and fall into place for something to take off the way that it did and become like such a cultural phenomenon is very interesting to me. And then this week on Amy Poehler's podcast, it's Tuesday when I'm filming this, and Tuesdays when the show comes out. So she released an episode with Jon Hamm. I only listened to this one partially because they talk a lot about Mad Men, and that's a show that's always been on my list. So I didn't want to have any spoilers. So I fast forwarded through a lot of it. I don't really watch anything Jon Hamm is in. I'm not like a huge fan of his per se, but it was an interesting conversation. They're clearly good friends. They've been in the industry just as long as one another, and it was one of those instances where, like, even though it's not someone that I'm a super big fan of, it was still a really interesting conversation. And I just love when they start talking about like SNL nostalgia, the behind the scenes. I believe Jon Hamm said he's hosted like 5 times. Everybody just speaks so highly whenever she has people talking about SNL on her show. Everybody speaks so highly of the time when like Amy, Tina Fey, Will Ferrell, when they were all cast members on the show. And obviously it's been so long and they've like had such huge careers spawn from them. But I love like listening to her be so nostalgic and like reminisce about SNL with all these people. So I really love Good Hang with Amy Poehler. I think she was quite deserving of the Golden Globe she won. Besides the fact that the other shows had been more like long running. But I think of the shows that were nominated, if it wasn't her or Dax, Armchair Expert, I would have been sad. So I'm glad it was her. The last food group, if you will, is reading. What I'm reading currently, what I've finished recently. My most recent finish of a book was Grape Juice by Eliza Dumais. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it so much. It's about a girl who is just like really bored in her day-to-day life. She lives in New York City. She works for, I believe, a wine distributor company. Her boss sends her to a vineyard in France to volunteer as someone working during the harvest, which is just like a certain amount of time in the summer where the grapes are in season. They have to be harvested very quickly. And she goes and she's in this group of people from all over the world that go to volunteer at this harvest. It is a love story. She meets somebody while she's over there, and it's just so beautifully written. I underlined so many things. I annotated the crap out of this book, and I just thought it was so beautifully written. Her character kind of speaks in metaphors and like the way she talks about wine. It's always things that are like kind of surprising. That's part of who the character is. That's part of her draw in the book, but it's also how the book is written. And I find it to be so beautiful. And I just, as someone who is trying to write a book and loves to read and loves just like the concept of prose as a whole, I think it's so beautifully written. I know some people didn't find it to be as like riveting, moving. The plot is kind of slow and simple, but I just really loved the way that it was written. So Grape Juice by Eliza Dumais, I think, is a gorgeous book. I did give it 5 stars. And I'm currently reading Strangers by Belle Burden. It's a memoir of a woman whose marriage ends very suddenly during COVID, and it's really good. I've heard so much about it online and from friends that I feel like I've gone into it with a certain perception, which is one of my like least favorite things to do, because then I'm either expecting a lot out of something or I'm expecting it to be really bad. So I like to go in to watching, reading, listening to things with less information. That being said, I think it's been really good. I found it to be a bit slow in the first half, but I'm only about 50% of the way through. So hopefully next Content Played episode, I can give you a full review because I anticipate finishing it in the next few days. But so far I'm liking it. It's very interesting. And it's very like, what the hell is going on? Like, what happened? You know, like you're really just trying to keep reading to figure out like what changed in this woman's life and in her marriage. And she's also trying to figure it out. And the fact that it's a memoir, I was going into it thinking it was fiction. And then the author's note is that like this is a retelling of what happened to her, and I realized that it's a nonfiction memoir, which makes it fascinating. So that part of it is really interesting. But so far I'm into it. I will let you know next time how I liked it once I finish. Couple little pop culture things. The Devil Wears Prada 2 comes out soon. I'm filming this on April 28th, and I believe it comes out right in the beginning of May. It lines up very closely with the Met Gala, which I'm going to talk about The Devil Wears Prada 2 comes out. The premiere happened in New York. I thought everybody looked really nice at the premiere. I loved all of the outfits and most of the dresses, but I felt like everybody looked kind of funny on the carpet. Like, I don't think it was what they wore. I think it was the lighting on the carpet. I don't really know what the vibe was, but I felt like all the photos that came out of the Devil Wears Prada 2 premiere were kind of awkward. I don't know how to explain it, but everybody looked really good. Like, it wasn't their glam. It wasn't their dress. It was just the carpet. Like, I didn't find any super flattering photos of anybody when I scrolled through Getty, but either way, I'm very excited about the movie. I did have a friend go to an advanced screening and said it was actually really good. I was going in with pretty low expectations, to be honest, because one thing I also hate is like seeing so much about a movie before it even comes out. And I feel like we've just seen so much about Devil Wears Prada 2, and they've just done so much press and so much promo, which I don't hate. We just saw so many paparazzi photos when they were filming. We've seen so much press. We've seen so many interviews. Like, we've really been flooded with Devil Wears Prada 2 content. And I know everybody's kind of eating it up, but it makes me fearful that the movie is not going to live up to the hype. But apparently it's really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I do love the involvement of Vogue and Anna Wintour in the movie this time around, but I also do get a little bit scared that it's going to dampen the humor of the movie, because I feel like part of the success of the original Devil Wears Prada is that it was like this satirical kind of poking fun at Anna Wintour and what it's like to work at Vogue. I was a bit worried that their involvement would weaken the movie a bit, but apparently not. Apparently it's pretty good. I am going in with a pretty low bar when I go see it, but I am looking forward to it. So that's something to look forward to / something going on in pop culture. Harry Styles got engaged, everybody. Moment of silence. Thank you. Harry Styles is officially off the market. Well, he's not married yet, but in theory, he's officially off the market. Honestly, I'm kind of into him and Zoe Kravitz. Like, I like the relationship. They seem to be really into each other. It is sad to have Harry Styles off the market. I can't lie. But also, like, you know, I'm not marrying Harry Styles. So he just is going to live forever on my wall, sitting on top of a caprese sandwich. And he can be happy with Zoe, okay? And also, to be able to say Lenny Kravitz is your father-in-law is sick. So happy for him. And Zoe Kravitz, like, continuing to build such an incredible roster. Apparently this will be the grand finale, which, good for you, girl. Good for you. On the menu for next time, what you can look forward to, what I'm looking forward to. I only have one thing, and it's the Met Gala, baby. This coming Monday is the first Monday in May, which means it's the Met Gala. And if you know me at all, you know how much I love the Met Gala. The Met Gala, if you don't know, is more than just a reason for all of the celebrities in the zeitgeist to come to New York City and go have dinner at the Met. It is an event, raises money for the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they raise a lot of money every year. Designers buy out a table, they choose which celebrities they're bringing to the Met Gala, and it's like a whole thing. And they design that celebrity's Met Gala look for the carpet, and it's just like a really great event. The Met Gala is hosted as the opening for the Costume Institute's exhibition for that year. So each Met Gala has a theme, which is based off of the theme of the exhibition for the year, and then has a dress code. The theme is what the party theme is. The dress code is what attendees are expected to wear. So there is a difference between the theme and the dress code, which I feel like a lot of people confuse. The exhibition this year is costume art. The show, set to inaugurate the Met's new nearly 12,000 square foot Condé Nast galleries, will consider depictions of the dressed body from across the Met's curatorial departments, pairing garments with the art objects spanning some 5,000 years. So this exhibition is basically celebrating the body as an art form and fashion as it relates to the body in art. So that's kind of the idea behind the exhibition and the idea behind the theme of the night. The co-chairs for the gala are Beyonce, Nicole Kidman, Venus Williams, and of course Anna Wintour, who is a co-chair every year because she is, well, no longer, I guess, the editor-in-chief of Vogue, but she's not going anywhere when it comes to the Met Gala, baby. She is not. She's holding on to that role with talons, okay? As she should. Nicole Kidman feels a bit random as a choice for co-chair, but like it works. She's fashionable. She's chic. I can see it. Beyonce, love. I feel like we've been waiting for her to be a co-chair, and I'm just excited to see her on the carpet again. And then Venus Williams, I feel like, is really exciting. I love having an athlete. I love having women of color as co-chairs. And then there's also a host committee. So there's the co-chairs of the actual gala, and then there's the hosts in the host committee. And the main reason that the hosts are kind of important is that they help curate the guest list for the event and who's going to attend. And there's a pretty long list of hosts, but the co-chairs of the host committee is Anthony Vaccarello, who is the creative director of Yves Saint Laurent, I believe, and Zoe Kravitz, who would die if she showed up with Harry on the carpet. I would love every second of if they showed up together, and hopefully she debuts her ring, her rock. So that's exciting. And then some notable people on the list of hosts, in my opinion: Serena Carpenter, Doja Cat, Misty Copeland, which I think is exciting, Lena Dunham, Sam Smith, Tiana Taylor, and Asia Wilson. Those are the names that like caught my eye when I was looking at the list of hosts. And I think the most exciting part of these hosts is that they have an influence on the guest list and they're guaranteed to attend. So we're going to see all these people on the carpet. I'm hoping we see Lady Gaga on the carpet, especially with her involvement in The Devil Wears Prada 2 and Vogue and all of that. I would love if her and Doechii came together because they have their song. But yeah, I think in terms of what people are wearing, the dress code is fashion is art. So it says the dress code encourages attendees to consider the many ways that designers use the body as their blank canvas. Andrew Bolton, who is the curator for the Costume Institute as a whole, he said the dressed body is the common thread throughout the whole museum, which is really what the initial idea for the exhibition was. So attendees are essentially being encouraged to celebrate the body as art and as a canvas for fashion and for designers. So I think we'll see a lot of skin, and I think we'll see a lot of form-fitting, skin-tight, but structural looks. A look that comes to mind instantly when I read about this dress code is Tyla's dress of sand from 2024, I believe. She went with Balmain and they created this dress out of literal sand that was like sculpted to her body. And I think we're going to see a lot like this. I think we'll see a lot of structural pieces that are art, but they're fitted to the body and they're celebrating that. So I'm very excited. I love Met Monday. It's my favorite day of the year. I love to post red carpet content on my Instagram story. So if you want to see what I'm thinking in real time, go follow me over on Instagram at Julia R. Stanton, and I will be posting on my stories, of course, and I might even make a little bit of like in-feed content for this year's Met Gala. I might play around with that a little bit. So go ahead and give me a follow over on the Instagram and the TikTok, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know what you're going to see. But I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode of Content Plate. I hope you are feeling well-fed and satiated. Let me know what you think of my takes. I really pretty much loved everything I talked about today. I don't know how often I'll be critiquing things or if I'll be critical of things. Unless it's something that like everybody's talking about and I feel like I have to talk about, but I didn't like it, then for the most part, this will be things that I'm consuming and enjoying. But hope you're feeling well fed after watching this episode of The Content Plate, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.